I'm here with Brian from Cobank, and they recently released a report to SwineWeb, and we are here to kind of touch on that report and hear your thoughts and what you have to say about the pork industry. So, Brian, with nearly a quarter of our pork being exported, how has that shaped the U.S. pork market internationally?
Yeah, sure. I think pork in general, um, we've seen kind of a swelling of demand over the last 10 years for global markets. So there's a good opportunity there for U.S. pork producers. And we've seen the market kind of shift. I think if we look back to, as we were kind of working through the report and thinking from a demand standpoint, thinking about how demand in China has impacted overall global pork production, African swine fever played a big role in that kind of, drawing effect of pork into China. Thinking at where we are today, that demand in China has kind of subsided as their pork production has rebounded. And today, U.S. pork exports have kept up pretty well despite that demand kind of drawing away. So, while this remains a really strong component of pork consumption is the export markets, it's interesting to see that the pork industry now is trying to focus a little bit more on domestic demand as well and see what opportunities are there.
So, as our pork markets evolve globally, what countries do you think have the best area of opportunity for U.S. pork?
Mexico is a top destination for U.S. pork, and remains, I think, a top destination for years to come. Part of that is when we look at the consumer in Mexico, we see an expanding middle class, kind of strong industry, and so from an income standpoint, the opportunity there with pork, I think it remains forefront of the market. For the U.S., close proximity also, helps out a lot. There's still plenty of opportunity in markets in Central America and kind of the Caribbean as well. We've seen the poultry industry gravitate towards that, so a big portion of U.S. poultry exports make their way into the Caribbean and some of the countries there. So, overall the opportunity is still kind of close to home, but there's still plenty of mouths to feed outside of that space as well. So, encouraged by kind of what's to come from an export standpoint.
So, you touched on the U.S. market. How are the U.S. markets changing with the pork markets right now?
One of the things I think about U.S. consumer, we noted in the report thinking about typical pork consumption items, and bacon really comes forefront of a lot of U.S. consumers to the point where, there's almost like a cult-like following around bacon over the last decade or so. But that's only about 15% of the whole carcass cut out. So, there are some, I would say, more sluggish cuts from a U.S. perspective. And some of this is tied to labor. We think about hams. We send a lot of bone-in hams to Mexico, largely because we just may not have the labor to kind of work down those larger portions. And so from an economic standpoint, it just kind of makes sense to do it that way. I do think there's, plenty of opportunity to kind of reimagine pork for the U.S. consumer, especially when we think about competing proteins. So what's going on in the beef space? We've seen that the U.S. consumer has gravitated towards, a highly marbled steak item, and they're seeing that in the beef counter. There's, I think, opportunity for pork, maybe to kind of, think about how, some of these items are marketed towards consumers. I think that's part of the new marketing campaign, is to try and help consumers who may be looking for maybe a value cut, but still want that kind of premium offering that can be afforded in beef. So it'll be interesting to see if this whole reimagining pork brings some new cuts for the consumer. I'm kind of excited to see what comes out of it. So
I really like the new slogan that they've come up with, and I'm excited to see how that plays into our pork market as well.
Yeah.
With the new Taste What Pork Can Do campaign that they have going on, giving a fresh new look to the pork industry, what excites you the best or the most about that?
Well, I think it may be some of the same offerings that we've seen just in a new way. A lot of times I'm kind of thinking of what the chicken industry has done to offer convenience for the consumer. Chicken can kind of adopt different flavor profiles and offer a convenient offering. If pork can kind of reimagine some of these things like pork crumbles, or something that can bring that to the table for the consumer in a way that maybe that hasn't been done before, and transfer some of those ideas and innovation. That's one of those things that I'm encouraged by. The other side of it is maybe thinking at some more premium cuts, and this is where I think maybe there's opportunity in genetics, on that side of the table of bringing in some of these genetics that might have more marbling in the meat, and trying to bring in something like a variant of a T-bone or a ribeye to the pork side, which from a competitive standpoint where beef prices are, I think right now probably great opportunity for pork to be thinking about these things if there's opportunity there.
So with the younger crowd getting more involved in pork events and the different festivals that we have going on, where do you see the biggest growth there?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think from a grilling standpoint over the last decade or so, there's been a lot of increased interest in grilling, and I kind of attribute this to some of the behavior that occurred kind of during COVID pandemic, where folks were not necessarily able to eat at restaurants as much, and so they tried to bring some of that restaurant type experience back home. And we saw a lot of these, pellet grills being utilized more frequently. And kind of the first thing, that first big item you may have tried is like a brisket, to smoke a brisket. And can be very complicated and difficult, but somewhat of a craft. I say pork, kind of fits in right behind that. And, things like a pork butt or ribs kind of fit in next in that craft grilling space, I think. So those are some of those trends that I think, they kind of emerged over the last 10 years, and they continue to carry through the current time frame. I still think, to your point of kind of the younger consumer, they are looking for unique flavors, unique different offerings. They're seeking them out. And pork is probably one of those kind of undiscovered places that there's both ample opportunity and a consumer looking for it, kind of in the younger generation and what they're trying to come to the table for.
How can the campaigns that we have going on right now in the pork industry build stronger connections with the home cooks that we have out there?
Yeah, I think there's some I think items in the pork space that have traditionally been kind of difficult for consumers to cook. Thinking about that perfect pork chop, I've seen this done in the restaurant format pretty well, and some of it is getting the right temperature there. So I think kind of honing in on that, proper cooking techniques is something that may go a long way for pork. That perfect pork chop, if it can get there, the nutritional benefits there, I think, come hand in hand with the flavor profile and cooking a great meal experience. So that's one area where I think it'd be great to see some more opportunity there, kind of capitalized.
With strong global demand and the new momentum here regionally, what excites you the most about the pork industry coming up?
I think, there's, from a producer standpoint, we kind of always have to kind of keep in mind where they're at. And with maybe a new domestic marketing campaign, there's opportunity for maybe producers to rethink, how they're strategizing, both from a risk management standpoint, but also the product offering that bringing to the table. So that's one component that I think maybe there's, quite a bit of optimism around. We've got strong global demand going on for pork still, despite some headwinds that are out there. And you've got low feed cost environment. So from a producer standpoint, things do look a lot better, I think, this year than we have over the last couple of years. So that's encouraging to kind of keep that momentum carrying through the remainder of 2025.
And Brian, I wanted you to touch on Cobank and what you guys do for companies and how you help others.
Sure. So Cobank is part of the Farm Credit System. The Co in Cobank, I say, stands for cooperative. So we're a cooperative bank. Our mission is to serve the financial needs of rural America in good times and bad. So with my role at the Knowledge Exchange, is to try and help understand the challenges that producers in different areas of the animal protein space, what they're going through, and opportunities that they see on the horizon.
And how can they get a hold of you or your company to find out more?
Sure. Go to cobank.com. Our research reports are available at the Knowledge Exchange at cobank.com, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of us.
Great. Well, thank you for your report, and they can also follow up on SwineWeb as well.